Members' business, notice number 2 for a motion in relation to the financial sector.
And I call the member.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I move that the motion relating to the financial sector in the terms in which it appears on the notice paper. Mr Speaker, the Banking Royal Commission was called by this government some 24 months ago. I must confess that while some people love Beethoven, others a good ballet, I've always loved finance. My first job was lifting reinforced metal for Smorgon's ARC, but my second job was at the Credit Union Services Corporation. And I always, from that point forward, remember marvelling at the extraordinary contribution that finance has made to our modern society. The payment system alone and credit creation alone creates 90% of our financial sector in our economy. The financial service sector remains one of humanity's great achievements. It has driven more growth, more innovation and more prosperity than any other invention that we have managed thus far to come up with. So many of our achievements can be traced back to finance. Often we find that inventions, for example the telephone, were invented hundreds of years before they became commercialised. And the difference was not the invention was better 100 years later, but rather that the person doing the invention had access to capital. The steam engine has a similar story. When Pitt the Younger was asked how it was that Great Britain prevailed over Napoleon in the Napoleonic Wars, the Parliament expected him to reply it was Nelson. Instead he replied it was the government bond market. Literally, the bond market allowed the United Kingdom to outspend Napoleon and the French. In The Wisdom of Finance, Mihir Desai is able to demonstrate better than I could ever that the modern world in which we live would not be possible without modern finance. Everything from insurance to hedges, forwards and leverage. All these things make our lives inexorably better and possible. We would not be able to drive a car without insurance, because without insurance we would be in the prospect of every time we had an accident or a crash being responsible for the financial outcome of that. Insurance allows us to de-risk our lives. Most of the protections that existed for customers engaging with their banks have been systematically undermined, however, by modern society over the years. Common law rights that customers existed are now encoded in law. Even ASIC, which quite frankly is very much of part of the problem that consumers now face in the financial sector, admits that the consumer law reforms of the late 1990s under the Howard government are counterproductive. Who would have guessed that laws such as CLERP 8 and CLERP 9 that force financial sector providers to produce hundreds of pages of PDSs would not be read by consumers and would be taken by them as signs of important examples that the product that they were using or that they were about to purchase must be credible because the paper on which it came was glossy and was thick enough. We know now that the laws that we introduced to protect consumers have actually done the opposite. So when some in this place insisted the answer to the problems in banking was more lawyers, I was slightly sceptical. But hey, what is another few $100 million thrown at a Royal Commission to see if lawyers that created this problem could somehow undo it? After all, those Portsea mansions don't pay for themselves. What was uncovered at the Hayne Royal Commission was disturbing. We saw a culture that had developed under the very laws that we had sought to use to protect consumers that allowed bankers and financial sector to instead rip consumers off. They were no longer working in the interests of their customers, but in the interests of themselves and their bonuses. But what was not uncovered was even more disturbing, Mr Deputy Speaker. The House Committee has been reviewing the financial service sector and post-Hayne implementation. What we have discovered is a cesspool of self-interest and consumers being denied their basic rights. If I did not believe that lawyers and regulators had created these problems in the first place, I would be demanding a Royal Commission now into those parts of the financial sector that the Hayne Royal Commission, for whatever reasons, decided to ignore. Indeed, Rowena Orr, counsel assisting the Commission's lack of curiosity in this regard was striking, especially compared to keeping Catherine Brenner in the stand for 3 days to go through emails that she had sent and received from ASIC. Yet when superannuation funds presented themselves at the Hayne Royal Commission and freely admitted to spending tens of millions of dollars on corporate hospitality to benefit no one but themselves, counsel assisting simply moved on. She did not feel that it was worth investigating any further. What we have found is a superannuation system that Australians are forced, Mr Deputy Speaker, are forced to contribute their money without being asked to do so, that spends $400 million on advertising, promoting itself, even though they don't have a problem actually getting people to buy their product because we have legislated that they are forced to buy it. We have been told that if this parliament dares to exercise its sovereign right to change and make laws, that they will unleash hell upon this parliament. We have found corporate marketing, as disclosed at the Hayne Royal Commission, in the tune of tens of millions of dollars, and other superannuation funds that feel that they are above the law and therefore do not have to answer those questions. So as we stand here today, we have no idea how much money the superannuation sector spends on corporate marketing for the benefit of themselves and their mates to the disbenefit of their members because they simply refuse to disclose to this parliament how much that is. We had the unedifying example of a Queensland superannuation fund donating money to a political party, and when the regulator, Helen Rowell from APRA, was asked how this was in the best interests of members and therefore not in violation of the law, she answered it was not a material amount of money. So we now have regulators in this space. Perhaps some of them have been beneficiaries of the tens of millions of dollars that we have thus far discovered being spent on corporate marketing, who are determining what parts of the law they will and will not actually regulate. They have taken it upon themselves to decide what this parliament meant and what laws from this parliament they will decide. They will decide to actually put on superannuation funds. So the members no longer have protection of the law, nor do they have protection of the regulators. And one has to ask why. One has to ask why a Royal Commission would not find this slightly curious and worthy of investigation. We had the unedifying example of the head of the Industry Super Holdings and Industry Super Association telling us that they don't make political donations. The only problem was that the party that had received those political donations had declared them to the Australian Electoral Commission, and so they were caught out. In their answer back to the committee, they told us that they don't make political donations, but the monies that they had given over to a political party they didn't think had been disclosed, so therefore their answer stood. So that is the attitude of superannuation funds and associations in Australia today, that they can break the law as long as they don't get caught. And then we have regulators who decide that they haven't broken the law enough for them to actually impose the law upon them. Then we have the situation of Industry Super Holdings. Well, that technically is outside the law. They don't have to comply with the best interest tests, as this parliament has imposed on superannuation funds, but APRA has decided not to actually enforce, for reasons that they can never properly explain, other than the fact that they feel it's not material. We have ASIC, who determines that they will persecute, and I use that word advisedly, Deputy Speaker, real estate agents, while ignoring the head of the Industry Super Association giving financial advice across Channel 9, 7 and other newses. We have IFM that refuses to come to the House committee, to a committee of this parliament, and disclose how much it paid out an employee for sexual harassment charges. We have situations where super funds are paying the New Daily, that are paying the ABC, but they won't disclose how much they pay the national broadcaster and its economics editor. Mr Speaker, Deputy Speaker, this is...
Order. The honourable member's time has expired.